My name's Mark Spencer, and I live in the San Francisco Bay Area in Mill Valley. And I always have trouble with that question. So I do a lot of work with Ripple Training with Steve Martin, creating tutorials and creating plugins for Final Cut Pro and Motion. And I also have a production company. So I do some industrial corporate video work. I do shooting and editing, and I do consulting for post-production work for corporations. And then I do whatever else comes up.
Do a whole bunch of things. Where I know you most from is your MacBreak Studio stuff. So lots of video things there, and also the little roundtables that you do.
Yeah, in fact, so the MacBreak Studio we've been doing for about 5 years now. So a weekly show, and that's been really fun. But we're shooting, and the roundtable is called the VUG, or the Virtual User Group, and we've done 5 of those now. And the idea has been try to do them every month, but it's been very difficult to get everybody together to do those. But we're doing one tomorrow. Actually, we're actually doing both shooting MacBreak Studio and Virtual User Group tomorrow. Since Steve's here, we're all in San Jose right now and doing this Final Cut Pro 10 Summit, which just ended for me right now. Steve's got a couple more classes, but we're going to head up to San Francisco tonight, up to Mill Valley, and then go up to Petaluma tomorrow and shoot a bunch of MacBreak Studio episodes, and then do our Virtual User Group.
Excellent. Oh, good. It'll be good to have another one of those done, because yeah, it's a lot of people, so it must be hard to get everybody together in the same place.
One of the hardest is it's people come from all over. It's frequently it's myself and Steve, and Sam Messman's been on a bunch, and Mike Matzdorf. They're fabulous. We've got a couple of really good folks on the show. Noah and Cadner's been on the show, and a couple other folks, and Chris Fenwick, who's great. This week, tomorrow, we're having Alex Gollner, or Alex 4D as he's known in in these circles, which is cool because he's here from the UK specifically for this Final Cut Pro 10 Summit. So we're like, dude, while you're here, can we get you up there, which is great. And we were going to have, unfortunately, we were going to have Peter come up too, Peter Wiggins, but we didn't get our act together in time for him to be able to plan it to work out. So I really love to get him on the show as well, so I'll have to do that another time.
And had you met Alex before last night?
No, well, I met him the day before yesterday, I think maybe on Friday for the first time. So it's one of these people I know on the internet and speak to a lot, but I've never seen in person, and it's so nice to actually meet people in real life that you interact with online all the time.
That's really funny.
Yeah, he's a good guy. He's was teaching for the first time. He taught a couple of motion classes, one on behaviors and one on publishing, and seemed to really enjoy it, so it was good. And I got to have dinner with him last night, and a bunch of you guys as well, and get to know each other a little bit better.
That's really good. Yeah, because I think I've only met you once or twice.
Well, I've seen you in many little these get-togethers. I saw you at an Adobe event. There was an Adobe event where we learned about Premiere like 2 years ago or 3 years ago, and you guys were there. That was down in LA, and I've seen you at various, mostly at LA Final Cut Pro users groups, things there. So I think more down in your neck of the woods.
Yeah, that's probably true, because I don't get out much.
Philip's going to get locked in a room coding the whole time, yeah.
I get to get out of Burbank somewhat more than Greg does. So how did you start out? What did you start?
How to start doing this kind of stuff?
Start out in your career.
Yeah, it's funny. They call it a career. I'm very lucky. I do things I really love to do, and I somehow have been able to keep doing them for the past 15 years. But I got into this kind of in a weird way. I guess my background and my interest originally, sort of back from high school and even before high school, were a lot of photography and writing was my big thing. But then in college, I studied math because it was easy for me. I did some writing, but I found English literature to be very, the way it was taught really turned me off. I loved English literature, but I decided it was going to be very hard to be a writer, and I was really good at math, so I did that. And after college, I didn't really have a plan. I went to a college, a liberal arts school, small liberal school back east, where a lot of people in there were pre-med or pre-law. They had a path they had in mind. They were going to medical school, they were going to law school. I had no path like that. It wasn't interesting me. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And so after school, I ended up running a bunch of dry cleaning stores. I actually owned a dry cleaning business, and opened a bunch of dry cleaning stores for other people. It was a franchise called Martinizing. So if you've ever seen, I don't know, is it The In-Laws with Peter Falk? You know, Columbo, he talks about a Martinizing store. Anyway, so I did that for about 4 years. So I owned a business, and it was a very good experience. I was running a business. I had 8 employees, and I was starting these plants for other people. But I wanted to do something else, and I heard about this thing called business school. I didn't know anything about it. I was not really aware of corporate life or professional life or anything very much after college. But I heard about, oh, you can go to business school and you can get out and you can make a good living. So I was like, oh, I'm all over that. I applied to different schools and I got into Wharton at the University of Pennsylvania. So I was still running the dry cleaning business when I actually started business school. That was actually very challenging because I found business school was great, but it was very challenging academically, and everybody else was there full time. That's all they were doing, but I was trying to run this business too, and I was in the middle of trying to get it managed and get it sold. But I loved business school. It was like really interesting, smart people, and they're all doing really interesting things. So my summer internship, like one thing you do in business school, like as soon as you start, you work on your summer job, because a summer job can lead to your full-time job. So I was kind of learning as I go. You're taking your classes, but you're like, okay, what's your summer job going to be? And I just had no idea. I mean, a lot of people there were like from New York and they're going to go into investment banking. And this was back in '87, right we had a kind of mini crash at that point. And a lot of people shifted from investment banking to consulting. They were like, oh, I don't want to do that. They all like, so they're going to go to Bain and McKinsey to do this consulting stuff. And it wasn't really my thing. So in the summer, I wanted to go to California. I heard about California, it sounded really cool. So I came out here in the summer and interviewed a bunch of companies, including Apple, and it didn't seem like anything was really going to pan out. So I came back like, I got this gig at the Small Business Development Center at the University of Pennsylvania. But then one of the managers from Apple called me and she said, hey, I heard really good things about you. Somebody I'd never met. I didn't even know her. Jody Bisson, this fabulous woman. And she said, I heard really good things about you and these other spots were taken, but I need a finance guy. So I got a job at Apple for the summer, in the summer of 1988, which is forever ago now. Which is obviously totally unrelated to what I do now. But it was great because I had a little Mac SE. You know, I was doing Excel, a little 20 megabyte massive hard drive underneath it, little discs you put in. But that was my exposure to California and to Apple. And I was hooked, totally. So I had a great summer and they invited me back. At the end of the summer they said, we'd like you to come back full time after. So my second year of business school, I was finished with the dry cleaning business and I had a job. Wow. So a lot of people were spending their time like figuring out getting their job when they get out of school, and I was just having a good time because I really enjoyed my classes and had a great second year of school. First year was really hard. So anyway, I went to Apple. I worked there for 4 years doing finance stuff, and that was good and fun. But Apple was going through, at that time, it was post Scully, pre-Steve Jobs returning. So it was kind of like, Scully was there in '88, but then when I came in '99, it was Michael Spindler and it was Gil Amelio. I was enjoying it. I was a financial analyst. I became a financial manager. I was a controller, and I was working all the consumer stuff because Apple was starting to get in the consumer market. Right. And it's fun because I felt like I was in a startup within Apple because there were a group of us, of 30 of us, who were selling the Performa line of computers in retail. And Apple didn't have any retail presence. They didn't understand, like, you have to have a box that sells itself, and it was fun doing that for a while. But everybody was leaving and starting other companies. A lot of people were leaving, so I followed some folks up to Portland, Oregon, who were running Central Point Software. Was run by Chuck Rosenberg, who came from Apple, was a marketing guy, and I worked for Pat Kearney, who was an old Apple guy also, and joined that company. But that company was going through a big transition. I sort of came in to a situation where they were like, we don't know what we're going to do exactly. So they ended up getting sold after a year to Symantec, who at that time was next door to Apple back in Cupertino. And like I was on the transition team to help with the transaction because I was a financial guy there. Yeah. But I didn't want to move back to being Cupertino again. I was like, I don't want to do that. I don't know what I want to do. So I stayed in Portland and kept doing some work there. And then I joined this company called Tut Systems, which is a little, you guys might be interested in this. They made these little devices that allowed you to transmit data at very high speeds over copper wire. Okay. And it was a cool technology. It was run by some ex-Central Point guys, so I went to work for them. And they had an office in the Bay Area, and they ended up moving me back down to the Bay Area. So I ended up back in the Bay Area. And I worked for them for several years, and then I ended up at a startup. So this is like 96. So I was a CFO of a startup in San Francisco from 96 to 2000. And none of this has anything to do with what I do now, except that while I was CFO, my first couple of years of joining that company, it was called Allegis, was great, because I love startups. So at the time, I wouldn't do a startup now, because it's just too much work now. It's just, I don't have the energy. But at the time, you know, I was in my 30s, and it was great. And we grew the company from 7 employees to 200, we're expanding, hiring lots of people. But it became, the job changed a lot. And in 1999 is when Final Cut Pro came out. And I was watching the whole video thing, because I was still, you know, doing photography. I was always interested in video, but intimidated by it. And Final Cut Pro looked interesting to me. And before I even got the software, I was following Creative Cow rabidly, especially this guy, Ralph Fairweather, who seemed to be answering every single question out there. And I would...
Almost like he was an employee.
Yeah. At work, I'd be reading that stuff on, you know, any free time I had. I was fascinated. So I got Final Cut Pro, and I bought a camera, and I started doing anything I could to learn about doing video.
That's awesome. Yeah, so you would have been doing all of that in San Francisco at the time, just before that was the dot-com boom, before the
yeah. Yeah, so I got into that in '99 and started really doing it a lot. And the life-changing event really was I took a 3-week trip to Hawaii in 2000, right at the Millennium, and I went with some friends. And my wife, I guess we were married at that point, and at that trip I realized, like, I want to do this other thing. So I came back from that and told my boss, the CEO of our company, like, I don't want to be a CFO anymore. I want to do this other thing, but I'll take my time, like whatever you need. So I took a year to transition out of that, and started building up a business. And I guess the main break I got, I started doing, I don't know, weddings, I did whatever. I could shoot whatever involved. I worked on a couple of short films that never ended up being done. That's one thing I really learned, is a lot of these productions, nothing ever, very few of them actually get completed. This was back where you run out of money for film stock, right? We were shooting on 16 millimeter, and it was that kind of thing. The Final Cut Pro user group in San Francisco, it was run by Kevin Monahan. I heard about that and started going to that. That was one thing that got me involved, and the other thing that got me involved was Alex Lindsay was running this group, this Pixel Core group that met once a week in San Francisco down on Market Street, where they bring in speakers, and they had really amazing people doing photography and video. And so I just started going to these meetings, and I got to know Kevin and his whole group, and I started learning After Effects. So first it was Final Cut Pro, and then it was After Effects. So I had Brian Maffitt's entire video library on the VHS tapes. You know, it was this big, yeah. And I read Chris and Trish Meyer's books. It was like After Effects 4.1. I just locked myself in a room for a month, and I just like went through all that and learned it all. Well, learned it all. I learned a bunch, but I made a bunch of crazy videos with that stuff, and I showed some of it at the Cutters meetings. And one of the people who was one of the original Cutters is Sharon Franklin. You know Sharon?
Yes, yes.
She's great. She was an amazing editor. So for some reason she mentioned me to Peach Pit, and this new thing was coming out, Motion, this brand new software. And Peach Pit asked if I wanted to do the visual quick start guide, write the book on it, and I jumped at that. And that's what really actually got me into the whole teaching writing thing. Right. Because I'd never written a book before. But I found the process really satisfying. There's something, it's technical writing and it's not for everybody, but for me, it was very logical and fun to explain how to do something. Thank you for mentioning, because I bought her book and I read it at night, and I remember putting stickies in the pages, and I stickied almost every single page. I mean, that book had 500 stickies in that thing, because I was the whole yoga thing that she did in there. That whole thing was fantastic. She really, I would say she was a big part of my influence in learning Final Cut. Life has changed a little bit in that way, that the software changes so quickly now that the books just can't keep up. So the book model and the software model have never really been in congruence with each other, and that's just gotten worse over time. That's like the new Brendan Boykin's new Final Cut book is digital only. you know, and I think that's kind of the wave of the future. But at the time, their books were still really popular, so I wrote that book, and that was like a 500-page book. I mean, that was like a big, thick book. And I had a new baby, and I got to put his picture in it and stuff, and just, it was really fun to do that. So I did several books after that over the next several years on motion and on Final Cut. And so I guess the other big thing for me was meeting Steve Martin. So it happened at NAB, and it happened back when Apple went to NAB.
Yeah.
So
That's a long time.
you know, it was probably around 2005, I would guess, about 10 years ago. And I remember because we were both working the Apple booth. I was working the classroom, sort of like an assistant to help people who were doing. There was 30 computers, and people would fly in. People would rush in and grab those seats and everything.
So they had the big booth, but beside the booth there was a classroom.
Classroom, exactly. And I think Steve was probably presenting there, and he said, "Oh, you know, you should do tutorials for us." And I had been approached by several other people, but I just liked Steve right away. It's like, you know, he's right. He's like, okay, this guy seems like a fair, good guy. Yeah, it's great. And it actually is quite good. You like it?
I really like it. It's quite spicy. And,
It's got just the right spice for me, because usually any amount of spice will send me. I love it, but it'll send me sweating like crazy. But this is okay. So our relationship started there. I did a motion tutorial for him, and there was pent-up demand for that at that time, because there was with DVDs. This is back with DVDs. So we did a motion. I think it was a Motion 3 DVD. We did a fast start, and it was really popular. So I did the training there, and then I got to work on a low-budget feature film, and I don't remember the contact into that, but it was some guys in San Francisco who now are off all doing a bunch of other things. Eric Bleiler and God, I'm trying to remember the director's name, Fong. I can't remember his first name now. It just escapes me. Super nice guy. But we did this movie. It's called Kung Fu-y, and it was a takeoff on these Kung Fu movies. And it was fun. I ran the group of PAs, and I did a bunch of administrative stuff up front. But we were shooting in a factory in Oakland at night when it was shut down, and it was hard work. Wow. It was hard work, and it was shoot over several weeks, and it was very hard work. I learned a ton during that process. But one thing I learned is it's not fun doing production unless you are the director, the DP, or maybe the AC. Like when you're very fully involved in everything. I felt like otherwise there's a lot of standing around.
yeah.
This whole summit to me has been just great. It feels like what NAB was like some number of years ago, where there was no contention and controversy, and it was just fun. Like everybody really wants to learn stuff, and they're really into it, and total blast. I mean, this past year I only did one Final Cut thing, because the year before motion classes at NAB were nobody came to them, and I spent a long time, you know, doing all this prep work. It's like, okay, something's off, something's not working here, because there's a certain market for motion that I know is very strong, because we service that market, but there's no overlap between that and the people who are coming to post-production world, at least 2 years ago. This thing, though, is like right on. It's really hitting the market, and it's good. And I think part of it is the new 3D text. Even if that's not your thing, it has just interjected more renewed interest in motion in general. So it's been really fun to teach this time.
At the trailers for all of the tentpole movies, there's not a single piece of flat text in there. You don't notice it. It's not greatly extruded or you know, gratuitously 3D, but none of it's flat, because flat text is boring.
Yep. They're all 3D, and they can all be, pretty much all of them can be done in motion with the same level of quality, which is really shocking. I mean, the quality of it's outstanding, and so I am oriented that way now. When I go see a movie and see all the trailers, it's like 3D text, 3D text, 3D text. It's like, oh, you could do that. Oh, you could. No, wait, how would you do that? Yeah, you could do that. You know, it's pretty, it's good. It's very, very good. Exciting. But I agree. When I first heard about this new feature in Motion, I was like, oh, really?
Do you think there's any connection between the whole production side and music? There seems to be with editors. There's a lot of overlap between editors having some sort of musical background and their ability to edit.
That's a good question.
I find that there's a lot of editors that have musical background. I don't. Yeah. And I think a musical background is really helpful. I mean, I've started playing instruments the past couple of years, and I find it definitely influences me. In editing, just paying a lot more attention to the music and editing in a musical, with a musical focus.
Since I guess it's something about rhythm and pacing,
Yeah.
and yeah. Why did you start on playing the guitar?
When?
Why? When and why?
Something I was always interested in, and I think I hit the age of like, if I don't do it now, I never will. You know, I just kind of, I'm feeling that way with a lot of things now. Like if there's things I want to do in my life, don't wait, do it. And what really spurned, so I had that in the back of my head for a long time, and then a friend of mine, who was my age, had done it. I went to visit him, and he had a guitar. I'm like, what are you doing? I was like, oh, I decided to learn to play guitar. And I remember it clearly because it was right before Thanksgiving. It was a week before Thanksgiving 5 years ago. It'll be 6 years this Thanksgiving. And I was just like, oh, you do it. You just do it. So immediately, the next weekend, I went out and bought a guitar. Right after that. And it's been, I just wish I had done it 20 years ago, 30 years ago,
Wow.
40 years ago. Because it's something I really, really enjoy. And I'm not very good at it, but I love it, and I get better. And to prove, we talked about this last night, like improving at something feels good.
Yeah.
No matter what it is. And this is something that, it's slow improvement, but it's definitely there. And it's really enjoyable. And I play music I grew up with, I play Led Zeppelin or Beatles or whatever, but to be able to play music that I know and love and grew up with is really, really satisfying.
I'm finding the challenge is finding music that is in a karaoke machine because yes, it's all out of the period where we've been together and been married, so we haven't been going out nightclubs and bars and places like that where you get exposed to new music. I don't tend to listen to music on the radio, so it's kind of hard to get exposed to new music. I took the opportunity while I was in Australia to spend a couple of car trips with my nieces in the hope that they might have something on the radio that I liked and
That you liked?
that I'd be able to. Yes, actually, I did make a note of one singer that I followed up, and my music teacher thinks there's some there I should sing. So
I do. So we do a bunch of Pandora because that introduces new stuff, or sometimes I'll use iTunes radio stations and get some variation. But the thing is, I've just been going back to a lot of Jimi Hendrix and old blues stuff, and really discovering old music and musicians I didn't know very well that have been around for a long time, like really old stuff. Robert Johnson and B.B. King and Albert King and Freddie King and just really old stuff. But my son, who is almost 11, I sort of regret it now, but I've turned him on to various, I was never a heavy metal person at all, but I turned him on Led Zeppelin, which he liked. But then he's really gotten into AC/DC, super into that, and the School Descended. So I don't know if you know this song, "School's Out Forever," the Aerosmith song. No, I'm sorry, the Alice Cooper song. Yes. So I played that for him. So he loved that. So now his whole playlist and all this music is all this like AC/DC and Black Sabbath, and and there's a radio station. When I get in the car to drive him now to camp or school or whatever, he takes my phone because it plays through the car, and he's got one of the iTunes radio stations. It's an AC/DC radio station, and it'll play like all this old, metal, 80s metal bands and stuff. And so he'll play it, and I'll try to remember who the band is.
Yes, thank you.
But instead of him, there's music on the radio he likes. I'll hit a station, I love it. He likes the pop music,
Right.
The Taylor Swift or whatever. He likes that, but he likes this old. He likes it loud. It's like sometimes there'll be a rock song, and there'll be a soft part, and he's like, "That's not rock." Yeah, it is. It's just a quiet rock song, or it's starting out quiet. Give it a minute, But he likes the.
my brother's really locked into rock ballads. That's his music style. Rock ballads of the 70s is his playlist.
That's awesome. So I love seeing kids. And other his friends discovering like Led Zeppelin, discovering music that's like 30 years old and but they're really into it.
It means he's rebelling against his parents, doesn't it?
So you've had a lot of change during your career. How do you deal with embracing that change, and particularly changes that are forced on us, like the change of Final Cut Pro to Final Cut Pro 10? How do you sort of deal with those changes?
Well, when 10 came out, I saw it as an opportunity. I mean, I liked what Apple was doing, and I thought it was interesting, and it was hard for us with Ripple Training because everybody sort of like said, "Whoa, what's going to happen?" And
we had similar issues.
Everybody would have stopped buying the Final Cut 7 training, obviously.
Right, they stopped buying that, and a lot of people would buy the Final Cut 10 initially because they wanted to figure out what it was and what it would do, and that did well. But then there was a lull, and it was really a matter of, do I have to go get a job?
Yeah.
You know, there was a time in there of a couple of months of like, I don't know if I keep doing this or not, because I do enough production and post work that feeds my teaching, because I don't want to teach stuff that I don't do. So I do enough, but I've never tried to build a career out of doing nothing but that. I don't think I'd enjoy it doing that all the time. And I don't know if I could actually build enough work doing that all the time. So having the mix of doing training and doing work is good, but I was really kind of concerned about it. Steve and I had a lot of talks about it, and we decided that we would basically, we called it doubling down. Like, we think this is going to work out. Apple's not stupid. The software is good. We like what it does, and we think it's going to work out long term. So instead of abandoning ship or doing something else or trying to put our eggs in more than one basket, diversify, let's really double down on this. So I remember that particular fall, December, I decided, okay, I'm going to come out with 2 more tutorials on this product instead of doing something else. So I just worked very hard and came out with 2 additional tutorials, and they sold. I mean, it was like, okay, there is something here. You know, is this dog going to hunt or not? But it looked like it was going to be okay. So we both said, let's really push into it. So that happened, and Nicholas approached me about doing the plugins.
At the time, that would have been a brave / foolhardy decision, because the popular feeling, the popular sentiment was that this was unprofessional, nobody's going to use it, nobody uses it. So it was good that you could see for yourself that stuff that you were doing for it was going to sell.
I didn't really care about that so much, because that is the people who were saying that are at the top of this pyramid, right. And there's very few of them making a lot of noise, and I thought there's a lot of people down here who are young, who are getting introduced to it, who aren't saying anything, are busy learning it, and they're our market, and that's who we're interested in. And so they get influenced, because if the influencers are talking about everybody. So when I realized that people who knew nothing about editing, and I would mention Final Cut Pro, and they would say, isn't that bad?
Yes.
I thought, okay, there's a problem.
Yeah.
Somebody who's nothing about this is being influenced by this stuff.
Yeah.
So I think it's taken 4 years to turn that around, based on a huge number of updates and a huge amount of work from Apple to demonstrate that they are serious about what they're doing.
And that's why I think all of the attention on Focus was important, but not important at the same time. It was
features?
Yeah.
Like professional features kind of things, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, given that there are 400 professional features made roughly every year, and 396 are being edited on Avid Media Composer, the mere fact that it's used, but it helps people understand that it can be used for this.
So therefore I can use it for my little production.
Because we went through a long time where it was, well, Final Cut 10 isn't professional. You might be able to do, skateboard videos, but it's not professional. And people would chime up and say, well, I'm using it to make commercials and other things, and I'm making money from it. Well, you can use it for that, but you can't use it for broadcast television. Oh, well, I'm using it to make just broadcast television. Well, yeah, you could do that, but you could never make a feature film on it.
And for a studio. There had already been feature films done on Final Cut 10, but they hadn't been in a studio, a major studio.
Not a big budget feature film, and that's why I think the Focus was important, but not important, because it's really,
Just to knock all those down, like it's not only possible, it's better. There's significant reasons that you want to do it, not just because it's possible, because there's workflow, and it comes down to money, time and money. And for me, it's also just enjoyable. I mean, I just find the software extremely fun to use.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. Versus 7. The true test is going back and trying to do something in 7 after being using 10 for a while, and you feel like you're going back and walking through mud.
Yeah.
And you never realize that beforehand.
Yeah, right now the most interesting editors to talk to are the ones who are doing work jumping between Media Composer and Premiere and Final Cut 10 and sometimes Final Cut 7. And you get people using 3 or 4 NLEs, and they're the ones that are really interesting. And so, one that I know of in particular, his favorite is Final Cut 10. He just finds it a lot easier and quicker to get a result.
And it's a personal thing. I mean, they're all tools, and some people are used to other tools, or they just like how those tools work better. So it's not for everybody, but I find that people who are learning it learn it in half the time as Final Cut 7. It's extremely fast to pick up and learn.
Yeah.
And
people who have got no background.
right, with no, that helps, right? Right. If you've you've been editing in Final Cut 7, okay, this is going to be hard. All right, here I would like to be able to lobotomize you in very specific areas, and then you will have a better experience.
There's a concept of unlearning that needs to happen before the relearning can happen.
Yeah.
I don't understand the human brain at all, but it seems to be true.
Yeah, and that's where it's there's not many companies that can take the risk of completely alienating an existing user base to do something radically different.
Yes.
And I mean, Apple was in this unique position of it didn't really matter. I think it mattered to them, but financially, they could afford to take a risk to say, let's reinvent the wheel, and all the people who have our existing wheel might be upset, and they were. And so it almost like they said, well, they might be upset, so let's not even try to make them happy. We're just doing this. Come along for the ride or not.
I get the sense from the conversations I've had with ProApps team members that they were somewhat surprised at the level of emotional connection that people had to the software, and that to the old software, and they assumed that would be then they were reacting to that emotionally rather than just simply, well, this is a different piece of software, just learn it, treat it as like a tool. I don't know that people necessarily get.
That is interesting, just the emotional connection to the tools and things that you experience and work with every day.
Yeah, you wouldn't expect a carpenter to say, well, I'm a Ryobi carpenter, or a Black & Decker, I'm a Black & Decker drill man.
Right.
Or what brand of dyno tune does your garage use to tune up your car? Who cares?
And it was odd because some editors felt particularly emotional about it because they felt that Apple had taken away their livelihood. And I'm thinking, guys, you've still got your editing skills, you've still got your software, the client doesn't care what you edit on, whereas for the people making training and for the people making software in the ecosystem, no, we really have lost. We've been napalmed.
Yeah, like Ripple and us, the moment that was announced, we got immediately napalmed. We had an immediate kick to the gonads of business going away, just evaporating overnight. Half our business just disappeared.
Gone. Well, it's funny, it came up in the class I was doing today. I was mentioning, I was talking about image sequences in motion, how you can bring in image sequences and do cool things with them with particles and things. Okay. And I said, well, to create the image sequence, you can take all your images, and all you need to do is rename them sequentially, like with a product like Renamer. And one guy pointed out to me, he said, actually, in the OS, you can now select a bunch of images and right-click on them and rename them all directly in the OS.
Really?
Sequentially, yeah. I didn't know that either.
I didn't know that? Wow.
So I was like, sorry, Renamer. Apple giveth and Apple taketh away.
Yes, well,
right?
Every WWDC keynote involves the developer roulette of who's going to get
absorbed. Right? Yeah. It's like you want to find that balance of providing a useful, necessary adjunct to what Apple does, but not being so useful that they'll say, "Hey, let's do that ourselves." Unless it's like, "Hey, let's buy you," But you got to really position yourself in a way that you can't suddenly be obviated. But it's, you don't know.
It's never really intentional. They just want to make the product better.
Yeah.
I don't know whether you know, but we had one of our products knifed.
What is that?
We had a little product called Event Manager 10.
Oh, I know of it. Absolutely. Yeah, sure. That basically got built in.
Yeah, and then at 10.1, when they moved to libraries, there was no role for this app at all.
No reason for it anymore. Yep.
It was knifed, but I'm glad because I think that the reason for that the people needed Event Manager was very important, but Libraries is so much better.
That needed to be done, and then I think Apple recognized and said, we have to do this ourselves.
Yeah. And they did it a lot better. So, so I'm happy.
I'm happy.
There's a problem that people who pay a little bit of money think the less you pay for software, the more entitled they seem to be. Not everybody, but you know, our customers for Sync and Link at $200 are always like, I'm running into this problem. Hopefully you'll have some time to look at it. Whereas somebody who's paid $5 for Event Manager 10 sends an email saying, I insist that somebody call me immediately to talk me through this. And like, not going to happen.
But more importantly, the reason that it went away was because Apple improved the software so much more. Library, I wish they'd been there from the beginning. There's probably good reasons why they weren't, but Libraries is so much better. It's better than what we had in earlier 10, and I think it's better than what we had in 7.
Oh yeah, I think so. It's interesting. I have 2 ideas about that. One is I still see a lot of confusion about media management. People just don't, even though I think it's gotten much easier. A lot of people, and maybe it's the level of people who are posting, asking questions, there's like people expect to be able to do everything right away without spending any time learning the software. So they don't understand why their hard disk suddenly filled up, and like, how can I put it somewhere else? Like, you need to spend a little time learning the software somehow, and not just, assume you're going to know how to do it. But there's still some confusion about that. And my other point totally escaped me. It was such a good one too. But the whole thing about the changes have affected as trainers as well, in good and bad ways. In some ways, because Apple's changing the software so quickly, it was 14 updates in the past 4 years. There's always an opportunity that people want to learn the new stuff, but we used to have a shelf life. We'd build a tutorial, and you'd have a year shelf life. It'd be a good product, it would continue to sell and have value. And now every 3 months there's some change that will sometimes be very significant and take existing products and make them obsolete. Or even if they're not obsolete, there's now the expectation that your product will perfectly reflect the software. And if a button has changed somewhere, it's like, well, wait, I'm using training, there's no button there. And like, okay, there's no button there, but everything works the same. It's like, well, there's no button. So we often, reshoot everything to make it exactly like the current version. But that's challenging. So we are always in production now, always in production, or always updating stuff. So it's a lot more work for a shorter cycle, and for lower price. When Final Cut was $1,000.
Oh yeah.
You'd sell training for $200.
Yeah, but not now. No. Yeah. So as we wrap up before the light becomes disadvantageous to us, what do you think is the biggest technological change that you've seen so far, and what do you think will be the biggest change that you'll see coming up
in the future?
God, I have no idea. I think resolution, with 4K and potentially 8K and how that's affecting everything, but generally it's everything getting faster and better.
Thank you, Mark. We appreciate your time. You can find more information about Mark at Ripple Training and the work that he does there, and you can contact him at mark@rippletraining.com. And thank you again for having lunch with Philip and Greg.
Thank you, Phil.